Hi again. Welcome to the second video. In this video, we are going to talk about what sociology is. We're going to go back to our first question from last time. Why are you watching this? Now, the way sociology works is that we explain patterns. So to begin with, we need to explain the difference between an event and a pattern. I've got a list of vocabulary that you'll need to know that basically gets you through what this particular video is about. We'll begin with event. And an event is exactly what you think it is. An event is just a thing that happens. In terms of explaining this, or in this question, the event is you as an individual sitting in your dorm room or your house or wherever you are and watching this video. It is an event in the sense that it is one person doing one thing. It's isolated. Sociology can't explain an event. It can't go into your brain and decide why you as a specific individual are doing this. What it can explain is patterns. Pattern, our second term, is a bunch of events that have something in common. So in terms of the question that we're trying to answer, why do you as an individual watch this video even though you're not particularly interested in it and I'm kind of boring? The pattern of a bunch of people watching that is something that sociology can begin to answer, because what it can do, as we talked about in the last video, is start to get at what is it in the water, in the society that we're all in, that possibly influences people to act this way. So what we're going to do is not look at you as an individual, but look at why 25 individuals are all doing this thing that they don't want to be doing at the same time. Sociology can explain the pattern. To understand the event, which is a worthwhile thing to understand, I mean, it's more individualized, you really need to go into psychology. All right, so what we need to do now is move into our next term, which is the term independent variable and dependent variable. And we're actually going to start with dependent variables. The pattern is the dependent variable. Dependent variable just very simply means, let's see, we'll leave this up for now. A dependent variable is a thing that occurs because of something else. It, in other words, depends on something. Why are you watching this? Well, it depends on something else. It could be that you're watching this because, well, in part, it's because I'm requiring you to do it. You wouldn't be choosing to do it. If I didn't require it, you wouldn't be watching this. This is not something you'd just be doing for fun. It's also possibly in part because you believe that a college education is going to be useful to you, and so you watch this because of that. Your watching it depends on your belief. It could be that your family or your friends have pressured you into thinking that you need to go to college rather than whatever, pursuing your dream of being in a band or whatever. Again, your behavior depends on those other things happening. So that's why what we will call a pattern, in just sort of more technical terms, is a dependent variable. Those things that I just described as possibly influencing you are what are called the independent variables. Independent variables, and for sociology we're going to define them a little bit more specifically. Independent variables, we get rid of this in common for just a moment. independent variables are what we're going to call elements of society. Elements of society that cause things to happen. One way instead of another. Your behavior goes this way watching this video instead of another going out and hanging out with your friends because of these independent variables. The independent variable of, again, the ones that I just talked about. Me requiring it for the course. That is an independent variable, an element of society that causes this dependent variable, your behavior, to happen. The pressure that you might feel from family or friends is, again, an independent variable. It's an element of society. It exists in society, and it causes the dependent variable to happen. The other one I said, your belief that a college education is going to be beneficial to you. Again, that belief is independent. It is an element of society that causes things to happen one way instead of another. What I want to do now is you'll be able to rewind the video so you can see this if you did go back, but I'm going to erase these definitions, and what I'm going to do is draw a very simple, not artistic diagram of this entire process of influence, of causation. So what we want to do is just really quickly get rid of this. We're going to leave our terms up. Fix independent variable. And what we want to do is just to get in our minds the way this works, I use what's called a causal diagram. So what we have here is a list of independent variables. And the independent variables are going to influence or cause the dependent variable to look the way it does. Again, in our example right now, the dependent variable is a pattern, and it's a pattern of 25 people watching a video they don't want to see. So the dependent variable is people watching video they don't want to watch. A little bit wordy, but you get the idea. It's not just you watching this, it's 25 people. That's why sociology can explain it. People watching, there we go, video they don't want to watch. The independent variables that we just discussed were one of them. I'm requiring it, or in other words, and this is a term that we will define later on, so don't worry about it. Right now, the terms I want you to know are these. The norm, the first independent variable we talked about, independent variable number one, is that it is a norm or an expected behavior, but I'll define that for you later. A norm for students. Because it's an expected behavior for students to follow the directions of their teachers, because of that independent variable, that element of society, we end up with this dependent variable. Another independent variable, the second one we talked about, was that you have a belief in higher education. That if you get your college degree, you will have a better job. But in terms of, again, explaining our pattern, 25 people watching a video they don't want to watch, this belief in higher ed, I would imagine every single one of you believes, whether you think that this is an enjoyable, desirable activity or not, you believe that it's a means to an end. It may be that you are thinking, well, I'm going to learn this and I'll pass the tests and then I'll get on. But still, it's the belief that you belong in college, that it's worthwhile, that is causing you to act in this way, to watch a video you don't want to watch. The third one is that you might have pressure from, we talked about family, we talked about peers. I would also say that your understanding of the world based on your high school teachers or people in the news media may also influence. So I'm going to make this slightly more general. Pressure from others. Pressure from others. So what we have here is 3 possible independent variables that lead to this particular pattern of behavior. A bunch of you watching a video you don't want to watch. Again, to take us back to one of the things we talked about in the very first video, we in sociology would say that it's, yes, you're choosing to watch the video, but you're not making this choice just randomly. Another quote from the syllabus, I referenced Marshall McLuhan in the last video. Another quote from the syllabus is from Karl Marx. Karl Marx said, people make their own history. In other words, you make your own choices. But he also said, you don't make them out of self-selected circumstances. You didn't get to pick to be born into a society that said, students are supposed to act this way. You didn't get to pick to be born into a society that has students at all. You could have been born into a hunter-gatherer society in which there aren't students, in which you don't have this particular independent variable, this particular element of society. You didn't choose to be born into a society that requires, more or less requires a college degree in order to be successful. If you hadn't been born into that society, you probably wouldn't have this belief, and this belief probably wouldn't be influencing you to watch a video that's, I mean, frankly, kind of boring. So as you can see, these independent variables, it's not that society is inside you and influencing you to click on the button in terms of like being like a slave master or anything like that. But the fact that you were born into this society, that this is the water that you're swimming in, that has these elements, is influencing 25 people who are all unique individuals to act in a very specific way, a way that all of them are acting in at the same time, and a way none of them really wants to engage in, which is interesting. All right, last term for today. This term is the sociological imagination. This is a term that was coined by a sociologist named C. Wright Mills. I'm going to erase the rest of this because it's got a little bit of a lengthy definition, at least the way I define it. So, and it's got a definition that I think is usefully broken down into 3 components. So let's do that. Sociological imagination is basically the process that we just engaged in. The sociological imagination is a way of looking at events or, in other words, things that happen, first of all, as part of patterns, or as parts of patterns. So that's the first thing. You see yourself clicking on this video, doing something that you don't want, and that's an event. But you can see it usefully as part of a pattern. So it's as part of a pattern, a way of looking at events as part of patterns in order to understand how the way society is set up and at this point I want to underline this. The way society is set up. So, a way of looking at events as parts of patterns to understand how the way society is set up influences those patterns to happen. In other words, the sociological imagination is a way of, first of all, it's a way of looking at events. In other words, it literally is an element of your imagination. It involves some creativity. Most people, most of the time, see events as caused by the individuals who are a part of them. And that's true. That's psychology. But there's another way of looking at things, and it's a way of looking at them that says, okay, if society were set up differently, these patterns would not happen the way that they do. The sociological imagination, in other words, is kind of the foundation of everything that we're going to do. Every question like, why are you watching this, that most of us would tend to have a psychological reaction to. We would say, well, I'm watching this because I have to, or whatever. Sociological imagination says, okay, the reality is that's true, but also, if society were set up differently, you wouldn't be doing this. If society were set up, because society is set up a certain way, and because we can understand how society is set up, we can have a deeper understanding of these events. Okay, so that is it for today. What we've got is what you'll need to get out of this in terms of the exam. An understanding of what events are, an understanding of what patterns are. They're simple ideas. The term independent variable and dependent variable, slightly more abstract, or maybe a little bit something that you're less used to. Remember, dependent variables are the things that are caused. They are the patterns that we're studying. Independent variables are the things that cause them. And the sociological imagination is just a way of looking at events and saying, okay, so wait a minute, is this part of a pattern? And if so, how is the way society is set up causing that pattern to happen? And the implication of this, especially for those of you who look at society and go, oh my God, this is a mess. If the mess is caused by the way society has been set up, that means that, at least theoretically, we could change the setup and end up with a different set of patterns. Okay, that's it for today. I will see you in the next video.